The soft blue light of the research vessel Harmony's Edge filled the main laboratory as Zephyrka stared at the data screen in confusion. The crystalline being's body shimmered with patterns of deep purple, a sign of mental distress among the ethereal collective. For the third time that cycle, Zephyrka reviewed Earth's planetary classification file, and for the third time, nothing made sense. Earth sat firmly at Class 13 on the Galactic Union's danger scale. Class 13 meant a world was barely habitable and extremely dangerous. Only the most desperate species would even consider landing on such a planet, and only with massive protective equipment. Yet according to the reports, over 8 billion humans lived there. Not just survived, but actually thrived, Zephyrka's colleague, a gas-based entity called Whisper 9, floated nearby. Its voice came through the translation device as a soft hiss. Still reviewing the human homeworld? The data must be corrupted. That's what I thought at first, Zephyrka replied, its crystalline form clicking softly. But I've checked the sensors 12 times. Everything reads correctly. The planet has active volcanic systems, massive electrical storms, dangerous radiation levels, and predatory creatures that could destroy small ships. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most of our member species. Whisper 9's gaseous form swirled with what might have been laughter. And the humans call this place home? Perhaps they evolved underground or in protective caves. No, look at this. Zephyrka touched the screen, bringing up images from Earth's surface. They build structures directly on the ground. Some even live near the volcanic areas. They swim in the liquid water, which contains creatures larger than our research pods. And this is the strangest part, they seem to enjoy it. The images showed humans engaging in what the Galactic Union would classify as suicidal behavior. They climbed massive rock formations without protective gear. They moved through areas of intense solar radiation wearing minimal covering. Some even jumped from great heights with only fabric wings to slow their fall. Perhaps the translation software is malfunctioning, Whisper 9 suggested. Maybe when they say fun, they mean mandatory survival training. Before Zephyrka could respond, the communication system chimed. A new message had arrived from the classification committee. The crystalline being opened the file and froze. What is it? Whisper 9 asked, noticing the sudden change in Zephyrka's color patterns. It's a formal request from the humans. They want Earth reclassified as a Class 8 world. Class 8 worlds were considered safe for general colonization. Most species could visit them with minimal protection. The idea of reclassifying a Class 13 Deathworld as Class 8 was beyond ridiculous. They must not understand the classification system, Whisper 9 said. No rational species would make such a request. Zephyrka continued reading. The request comes from Ambassador Jake Morrison, humanity's representative to the Galactic Union. He says Earth is pretty normal and suitable for tourism. He's attached what he calls promotional materials. The promotional materials were even more confusing than the original data. Bright, colorful images showed humans in various dangerous situations, all smiling. One image showed a human child, no more than a few cycles old, playing in what appeared to be a zone of lethal solar radiation. The text called it a fun day at the beach. Another image showed humans floating on the surface of their liquid water oceans, surrounded by massive predatory creatures. The text read, swimming with dolphins, a magical experience. Zephyrka's research indicated that these dolphins were intelligent predators capable of ramming holes through ship hulls. This cannot be accurate, Whisper 9 said, reviewing the materials. These images must be digitally altered for some kind of psychological warfare. But Zephyrka was beginning to suspect something else entirely. The being had spent decades studying dangerous worlds and the creatures that lived on them. There was a pattern in evolution that most species followed when facing extreme environments. They either developed technology to protect themselves, or they adapted to become part of the danger. What if, Zephyrka said slowly, the humans are telling the truth? Impossible. No species could survive those conditions without extensive protection. But what if they did? What if they evolved on that world and adapted to it completely? Zephyrka's form brightened with excitement. Think about it. Every measurement we take shows how dangerous Earth is to us. But we're not from Earth. What if those conditions aren't dangerous to humans, because they're designed for exactly those conditions? Whisper9's gaseous form contracted, a sign of deep thought. You're suggesting that humans are so adapted to their death world that they don't realize it's a death world. Exactly. Look at this request again. Ambassador Morrison isn't lying or trying to deceive us. He genuinely believes Earth is a safe, pleasant world suitable for tourism. Because for humans it is, the implications were staggering. If humans had evolved to thrive in Class 13 conditions, what did that make them? Every species in the Galactic Union had evolved on worlds classified between Class 3 and Class 7. Even the toughest military species came from Class 9 worlds at most. We need to investigate this properly, Zephyr announced. I'm going to recommend a full research expedition. To a Class 13 death world? The committee will never approve that. It would be suicide, not if the humans are right. If Earth really is safe for habitation, then our classification system has a serious flaw. And if they're wrong, Zephyr paused, considering the alternative. If they're wrong, then we need to understand how an entire species can be so completely delusional about their own environment. Zephyr began composing a formal request to the classification committee. The proposal was simple. A small research team would visit Earth under human supervision to verify the planet's actual danger level. If the humans were correct, Earth would be reclassified. If they were incorrect, humanity would need psychological evaluation and possibly protective relocation. As the proposal was transmitted, Whisper9 raised a concerning point. What if there's a third option? What if the humans are telling the truth from their perspective, but Earth really is as dangerous as our sensors indicate? What do you mean? What if humans have simply evolved to be so incredibly tough that they don't notice the danger? What if they're not delusional about their world being safe? What if they're just that much stronger than every other species in the galaxy? The thought sent ripples of unease through Zephyr's crystalline structure. The Galactic Union had always assumed that intelligence and physical resilience were inversely related. The most advanced civilizations came from peaceful worlds, where thinking was more valuable than surviving, but humans seemed to have developed advanced technology while living in conditions that would kill most other species instantly. They had created art, literature, and complex social structures while dealing with predators, natural disasters, and environmental hazards that would send other civilizations fleeing to safer worlds. If that's true, Zephyr said quietly, then humans might be the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Not because they're aggressive, but because they're so adapted to danger that they don't recognize it anymore. The response from the classification committee came faster than expected. The research expedition was approved, but with strict conditions. The team would remain in orbit unless the humans could guarantee safety. Any sign of danger would trigger immediate evacuation. Ambassador Jake Morrison's reply to the expedition announcement was enthusiastic. He welcomed the research team and suggested they visit during Earth's summer season when the weather was nice and mild. He offered to arrange tours of what he called some beautiful, peaceful locations, including places named Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and the Great Barrier Reef. Zephyr looked up the names in Earth's database. Yellowstone was an active supervolcanic system. The Grand Canyon was a massive geological fault. The Great Barrier Reef was in an ocean filled with venomous creatures. The humans considered these peaceful locations. As Harmony's edge set course for the Sol system, Zephyr wondered if they were about to make first contact with a species so perfectly adapted to danger that they had forgotten what safety meant. Or perhaps they were about to discover that the galaxy's classification system had been fundamentally wrong about what constituted a habitable world. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. The orbital station New Horizon looked peaceful enough from the outside. Zephyr watched through the viewport as their shuttle approached the human facility. The station appeared normal by galactic standards, with proper shielding and standard atmospheric controls. Perhaps the humans were more sensible than their reports suggested. That hope died the moment they docked. Dr. Lisa Carter met them at the airlock, wearing nothing but a thin fabric covering and breathing the station's atmosphere directly. No protective suit, no breathing apparatus, no radiation shielding. She greeted them with what humans called a smile, showing her bone-white teeth in what most species would recognize as a threat display. "Welcome to Earth orbit," she said cheerfully. "I'm so excited to show you around. We've planned a wonderful surface tour for you." Zephyrka's crystalline form flickered with alarm patterns. "Surface tour? But surely we can conduct our research from the safety of the station?" "Oh, you can't really understand Earth from up here," Dr. Carter replied. "You need to experience it firsthand. Don't worry, we'll start with something mild. I thought we'd visit Colorado first. It's pretty tame, just some mountains and fresh air." Whisper Nine's gaseous form contracted nervously. "Mountains? Our data suggests Earth's elevated terrain reaches dangerous altitudes." "Well, sure, some of them are pretty tall," Dr. Carter admitted. "But the Rockies are nothing compared to the Himalayas. You'll be fine." The shuttle ride to the surface was the most terrifying experience of Zephyrka's life. Earth's atmosphere was thick with water vapor, electrical discharges, and violent wind patterns. The shuttle shook as it descended through what Dr. Carter casually called a bit of turbulence. Lightning bolts that could power entire cities flashed around them. "Beautiful storm," Dr. Carter commented, watching the electrical chaos outside. "We really needed the rain." She spoke as if the deadly energy discharges were somehow beneficial. Zephyrka's sensors screamed warnings about electromagnetic radiation levels that would fry most electronic equipment. Yet the human shuttle continued operating normally, and Dr. Carter seemed completely relaxed. They landed at something called Denver International Airport. The moment the shuttle doors opened, Zephyrka felt the crushing weight of Earth's gravity. Even with mechanical assistance, moving was difficult. The atmosphere was thin at this altitude, making breathing hard even with artificial enhancement. Mountain air," Dr. Carter said, taking a deep breath. "Isn't it refreshing?" The air that Dr. Carter found refreshing was barely dense enough to support life. Zephyrka's equipment registered dangerous radiation levels from the local star, atmospheric pressure that would crush most beings, and gravity that made every movement exhausting. Yet as they left the landing facility, Zephyrka saw something impossible. Human children were playing outside. Small beings, no more than a few cycles old, were running around in the deadly conditions without any protection. They were laughing and making noise, completely unaware that they were existing in what amounted to a combat zone. "How do they survive?" Whisper Nine asked quietly. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter looked confused. "They're just kids playing. It's a beautiful day, a beautiful day." The radiation levels were in the lethal range. The atmospheric pressure was crushing. The gravity was punishing. And the humans called it beautiful. Their guide to the mountain region was a human named Ben Rodriguez. He worked as something called a park ranger, which apparently meant he spent his days walking around the most dangerous parts of the local area. He greeted them wearing minimal protective gear and carrying only basic supplies. "Welcome to Rocky Mountain National Park," Ben said. "We've got some great trails to show you. Nothing too challenging, just a nice easy hike up to about 12,000 feet. 12,000 feet. At that altitude, the atmospheric pressure would be even lower, the radiation even more intense. Zephyrka's equipment was already struggling to maintain life support at the current elevation. "Perhaps we could observe from the transport vehicle?" Zephyrka suggested hopefully. "Oh, you can't really experience the mountains from inside a car," Ben replied. "You need to feel the wind, smell the pine trees, hear the wildlife. It's what makes this place special, the wildlife." Zephyrka had studied Earth's fauna. The creatures in this region included massive predators that could tear through metal with their claws. Yet Ben spoke of them as if they were decorative features. As they walked along what Ben called a gentle nature trail, Zephyrka observed the impossible. Human families were hiking the same paths, including elderly individuals and small children. They carried minimal equipment and seemed to be enjoying themselves. Some were even consuming food and liquid in the open air, apparently unaware that they were ingesting potential toxins. "This is one of my favorite spots," Ben said, stopping at a scenic overlook. "Great view of the valley." The view was indeed spectacular, but what amazed Zephrka was that humans had built structures here. Permanent buildings designed to withstand the harsh conditions. People actually lived in this environment by choice. "How long have humans inhabited this region?" Zephrka asked. "Oh, people have been living in these mountains for thousands of years," Ben replied. "The indigenous tribes were here long before European settlers arrived. They adapted pretty well to the conditions." Adapted. That word again. Humans didn't just survive in these conditions, they adapted to them. They made them home. The real shock came when they encountered actual wildlife. A large, dark-furred predator emerged from the trees near the trail. Zephrka's sensors immediately identified it as a Class 7 threat, a creature capable of destroying light vehicles and killing most galactic species with ease. Whisper 9 began preparing emergency teleportation procedures. Zephrka activated defensive systems. Both aliens prepared for immediate evacuation. Ben Rodriguez looked at the creature and smiled. "Hey there, big guy. Just passing through?" The predator, Ben called it a black bear, looked at the group with mild interest. It was massive, covered in natural armor, and equipped with claws that could tear through metal. Ben stood calmly, making soft sounds at the creature. "Beautiful animal," Dr. Carter said, pulling out a small device to record images. "They're usually pretty shy around people. Pretty shy." This apex predator was considered shy by humans. The bear looked at them for a moment longer, then wandered away into the forest. Ben and Dr. Carter watched it go with obvious appreciation. "That was amazing," Dr. Carter said. "I love seeing them in their natural habitat." Their natural habitat. Humans shared this deadly environment with creatures that could kill them easily, and they found it amazing rather than terrifying. The day continued with more impossible observations. They visited a human settlement called Estes Park, where people lived permanently in the mountains. Children attended schools built directly on the mountainside. Adults worked jobs that required them to spend entire days in the harsh conditions. At one point, they stopped at what Ben called a visitor center. Inside, human children were participating in something called an educational program. The instructor, a young woman named Amy, was teaching them about local wildlife. "Now, who can tell me what to do if you meet a mountain lion?" Amy asked. Small human children eagerly raised their hands to answer questions about surviving encounters with apex predators. This was normal education for them. They were learning survival skills as basic knowledge, the same way other species might learn mathematics. "You make yourself look big and back away slowly," one child answered. "That's right," Amy said. "And what about bears?" "Stand your ground and make noise," another child replied. These young humans were casually discussing tactical responses to encounters with creatures that could destroy small spacecraft, and they were doing it with the same cheerful attitude they might use to discuss recreational activities. As the day ended, Zephrka realized something profound. The humans weren't delusional about their world being safe. From their perspective, it was safe. They had evolved to handle conditions that would kill most other species. What the Galactic Union classified as extreme dangers, humans classified as normal environmental factors. "So what did you think of your first day on Earth?" Dr. Carter asked as they returned to the shuttle. Zephrka looked back at the mountains, where human families were still hiking in conditions that required the aliens to use full life support systems. In the distance, children were playing in areas that registered as hazardous on every sensor. "It was," Zephrka said carefully, "educational." "Great. Tomorrow we'll visit the ocean. I think you'll love it." The weather forecast shows perfect conditions for swimming. Swimming. In the liquid water bodies filled with massive predators and toxic organisms. Zephrka's crystalline form flickered with what might have been panic. The humans considered this a recreational activity. As their shuttle lifted off, leaving the mountain region behind, Zephyr began to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. Earth wasn't just a Class 13 Deathworld that humans had somehow learned to tolerate. It was a Class 13 Deathworld that humans had turned into a playground, and tomorrow they were going swimming. Captain Roy Thompson met them at the marina in San Diego wearing nothing but colorful shorts and a thin shirt. His skin was dark from what he cheerfully called sun exposure, direct radiation from Earth's star that would cause immediate cellular damage to most galactic species. He looked healthy and relaxed, as if daily exposure to lethal radiation was somehow beneficial. "Perfect day for diving," Roy announced, looking at the vast blue expanse of Earth's ocean. "Visibility should be great, and the water's nice and warm." Zephyr stared at the liquid water that stretched beyond the horizon. The alien sensors immediately registered the ocean as a Class 15 hazard zone. The pressure differentials alone would crush most spacecraft. The salinity levels were toxic to virtually every known species. And according to the data, this liquid death trap was home to creatures larger than some galactic battleships. "Perhaps we could observe from the safety of the vessel?" Whisper 9 suggested nervously. "Oh, you can't really appreciate the ocean from up here," Roy replied. "You need to get down there with the fish and coral. It's like entering another world." Another world. That was exactly what Zephyr was afraid of. Dr. Lisa Carter had joined them for the ocean expedition, along with a marine biologist named Professor Janet Wells. All three humans seemed excited about the prospect of entering the liquid hazard zone, apparently for recreational purposes. "We've arranged for you to see some of our local marine life," Professor Wells explained. "Dolphins, sea turtles, maybe some sharks if we're lucky." Sharks, Zephyr had studied these creatures in the database. They were mobile predator units, equipped with multiple rows of bone-crushing weapons, hydrodynamic armor, and electromagnetic sensing capabilities. The idea of encountering them voluntarily seemed like madness. "The sharks are quite safe, aren't they?" Whisper 9 asked hopefully. "Oh, sure," Roy replied. "Great whites are pretty docile most of the time. Beautiful creatures. We might even see some whale sharks. They're the gentle giants of the ocean." Gentle giants. According to the data, whale sharks were 40 feet long and weighed as much as small starships. Humans considered creatures the size of combat vessels to be gentle. The aliens were fitted with the most advanced protective equipment available. Full environmental suits, pressure compensators, emergency teleportation beacons, and backup life support systems. The preparation took over an hour and required multiple safety checks. Roy Thompson put on a mask and fins. "That's it?" Zephyr asked, watching the humans' minimal preparation. "What about pressure protection, atmospheric supply, emergency systems?" "I'll be fine," Roy said with a grin. "I've been diving these waters for 20 years. The ocean and I are old friends." Old friends. The humans spoke of the deadly liquid environment as if it were a social companion. They descended into what Roy cheerfully called Monterey Bay the moment they entered the water. Zephyr's sensors went crazy. Pressure readings that would implode most structures. Chemical compositions that would dissolve most materials. And everywhere, movement in the murky depths. Roy dove ahead of them, swimming with easy movements through the liquid that required the aliens to use mechanical assistance just to survive. He pointed at various creatures as if he were giving a tour of a peaceful garden. "There's a harbor seal," he said through the communication system. "They're curious little guys. Sometimes they'll come right up to you." The harbor seal was a streamlined predator with powerful flippers and sharp teeth. It circled the group with obvious intelligence, studying them with dark eyes. Roy swam closer to it, apparently unafraid of the creature's weapons. The seal approached Roy and allowed him to touch its sleek hide. The human and the predator interacted as if they were longtime acquaintances. Zephyr watched in amazement as one of Earth's apex predators treated a human as a harmless visitor. "How does it know you're not a threat?" Zephyr asked. "Why would I be a threat?" Roy replied, genuinely confused by the question. "We're just sharing the same space. The ocean's big enough for all of us. Sharing space with predators. Humans had somehow established peaceful coexistence with creatures that could kill them easily. It defied every principle of predator-prey relationships that Zephyr understood. They continued deeper into the liquid environment. Schools of fish moved around them like living clouds, their scales flashing in the filtered sunlight. Roy pointed out different species with obvious affection. Those are anchovies. And see those bigger ones? Pacific sardines. They're all part of the food web that supports the bigger predators. Food web. The humans understood that they were visiting a complex ecosystem of predators and prey, yet they entered it voluntarily and seemed to enjoy the experience. Professor Wells joined them, swimming effortlessly through the hazardous environment. She pointed to a large, slow-moving creature near the bottom. Pacific angel shark, she announced. They're perfectly harmless unless you step on them. Unless you step on them. The professor spoke casually about the conditions under which the creature would become dangerous, as if accidentally activating a predator was a normal risk to consider. But the real shock came when they encountered a pod of dolphins. Zephyr sensors immediately classified the approaching creatures as extreme threats. They were organized, intelligent predators moving in coordinated formation. Each one was equipped with natural sonar, hydrodynamic propulsion, and a reinforced skull capable of ramming through ship hulls. They were approaching at high speed in attack formation. "Dolphins!" Dr. Carter exclaimed with delight. "How wonderful!" Wonderful. The humans were pleased to encounter what appeared to be an organized predator strike force. The dolphins circled the group, clicking and whistling in complex communication patterns. Their echolocation systems were scanning the aliens constantly, gathering tactical information. This was clearly a reconnaissance mission by hostile forces. Roy swam toward the largest dolphin. "No," Zephyr transmitted urgently. "Don't approach the pack leader." But Roy was already interacting with the creature. The dolphin allowed the human to touch its dorsal fin and even seemed to be enjoying the contact. Other dolphins approached, clicking what sounded almost like laughter. "They're curious about you," Roy explained to the aliens. "Dolphins are incredibly intelligent. They're probably wondering what those suits are for, intelligent." The predators were not only organized and well-armed, they were smart enough to be studying the aliens. This was first contact with a hostile intelligence, and the humans were treating it like a social event. One of the younger dolphins swam directly at Zephyr. The alien prepared emergency teleportation, certain that the creature was about to attack. Instead, the dolphin gently bumped against the protective suit, then swam in a playful circle around the terrified researcher. "He likes you, Professor," Wells said. "You should feel honored." Dolphins are excellent judges of character. Judges of character. The humans believed that apex predators were capable of moral evaluation and that their approval was somehow meaningful. The encounter continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The dolphins played around the humans like old friends, performing what appeared to be entertainment displays. They jumped out of the water, spun in complex patterns, and seemed to be showing off for their audience. "This is why I love the ocean," Roy said, watching a dolphin leap completely out of the water nearby. "Where else can you have experiences like this?" Where else, indeed? Zephyr was beginning to understand that Earth's oceans weren't just hazardous environments that humans had learned to tolerate. They were recreational areas where humans went to relax and have fun. As they prepared to surface, Professor Wells pointed to something in the distance. "Oh, look. Humpback whales." The creatures approaching were larger than the aliens' research vessel. Massive biomechanical units that moved through the water with impossible grace. Their songs echoed through the liquid medium, complex acoustic patterns that could be communication or possibly some form of sonar mapping. "They're migrating," Dr. Carter explained. "They travel thousands of miles every year, incredible navigators. Thousands of miles." These massive creatures moved across entire continents, using Earth's oceans as transportation corridors. The scale of life in this environment was beyond anything in the galactic databases. One of the whales approached their group. Zephyrka's sensors registered a creature over 50 feet long and weighing more than most starships. It moved with careful precision. Studying the small beings that had entered its domain, Roy swam toward the whale. The act was so insane that Zephyrka couldn't process it at first. A human, barely 6 feet long and weighing perhaps 200 pounds, was approaching a creature that could swallow him without noticing, but the whale seemed to recognize Roy as something worthy of gentle treatment. It moved slowly, allowing the human to swim alongside its massive head. Roy placed his hand on the whale's skin, and the creature seemed to respond to the touch with what could only be described as pleasure. "Hello, beautiful," Roy whispered. "Beautiful." The human found the creature larger than most buildings to be aesthetically pleasing. He was interacting with it as if it were a beloved pet rather than a mobile mountain of living tissue, the whale sang, a low harmonic sound that vibrated through the water and into their bones. Professor Danny Clark met them at the weather station in Kansas with the kind of excitement that most species reserve for major celebrations. His eyes were bright as he pointed toward the darkening sky, where massive cloud formations were building into what looked like atmospheric warfare. "Perfect timing," Danny announced. "We've got a beautiful storm system moving in. Nothing too intense, just a mild spring thunderstorm. You're going to love this." Mild. Zephyrka's sensors were already detecting electromagnetic activity that could disable most spacecraft. The atmospheric pressure was dropping rapidly, creating conditions that would be classified as a planetary emergency on most worlds, and the human meteorologist called it mild. "Perhaps we should observe from inside." "A protective facility?" Whisper 9 suggested, its gaseous form contracting nervously as the first rumbles of thunder echoed across the landscape. "Oh, you can't really experience a thunderstorm from indoors," Danny replied. "You need to feel the power, smell the rain, hear the thunder properly. It's one of nature's greatest shows." "One of nature's greatest shows." The human spoke of the approaching electromagnetic disaster as if it were entertainment. The first lightning strike hit about 3 miles away. The electrical discharge lit up the entire sky with energy that could power a small city. Zephyrka's protective systems immediately went into emergency mode. Preparing for possible electromagnetic pulse damage, Danny pulled out a small device and pointed it at the storm. "Gorgeous bolt," he said, recording the lethal energy discharge. "Classic cloud-to-ground strike. The electrical potential in that system must be incredible." Incredible was one word for it. Terrifying was another. The storm was generating enough electrical energy to destroy most galactic installations, and it was moving directly toward them, but as they watched, something impossible happened. Human activity continued normally around them. A yellow vehicle filled with small humans drove past on the nearby road. Through the transparent windows, Zephyrka could see human children sitting calmly as electromagnetic chaos erupted around them. The vehicle showed no signs of shielding or protection systems. "School bus," Danny explained, noticing their attention. "Kids going home from school. They're probably excited about the storm. Most children love thunder and lightning." Children love thunder and lightning. Young humans actively enjoyed atmospheric phenomena that would send most species fleeing to underground shelters. The storm intensified rapidly. Rain began falling in heavy drops that struck with significant kinetic force. Wind speeds increased to levels that would qualify as weapons-grade atmospheric disturbance. Lightning strikes became more frequent, creating a nearly constant display of electrical warfare overhead. Zephyrka and Whisper 9 huddled inside their emergency shelter, sensors screaming warnings about the deteriorating conditions outside. Through the protective barrier, they watched Danny Clark standing in the open, letting the kinetic water projectiles strike his unprotected body while he recorded measurements. "This is fantastic," Danny said, water streaming down his face. "Look at that rotation in the clouds. We might even get some funnel cloud development." Funnel cloud development. The professor was hoping for atmospheric conditions that could generate tornadoes, mobile destruction systems that could level entire settlements. The lightning strikes were getting closer. Each bolt created electromagnetic pulses that interfered with the aliens' equipment. The thunder was so loud it physically hurt, even through their protective gear. The wind was strong enough to move their shelter, yet human vehicles continued using the transportation routes. Adults walked between buildings as if the electromagnetic bombardment overhead was merely inconvenient. Some humans were even outside, by choice, engaging in what appeared to be recreational activities. There, Danny pointed to a nearby field where a human figure was visible through the rain. Someone's out jogging. Perfect weather for a run. The rain keeps you cool. Perfect weather for a run. A human was voluntarily exercising in conditions that qualified as a natural disaster by galactic standards. The situation became even more surreal when they reached the small town of Russell. Despite the ongoing atmospheric assault, the settlement was functioning normally. Lights were on in buildings. Vehicles moved through streets. Humans went about their daily business as if deadly energy discharges weren't happening directly overhead. They took shelter in what Danny called a local diner, a food preparation facility where humans gathered during the storm. Inside, families sat at tables consuming nutrients while electromagnetic chaos raged outside. Children pressed their faces against windows, watching the lightning with obvious delight. "Impressive storm," commented an elderly human woman at a nearby table. "Reminds me of the big one we had last spring. This wasn't even an unusual event for these humans. They experienced atmospheric warfare on a seasonal basis and considered it normal weather. The diner's owner, a man named Pete Johnson, approached their table with obvious curiosity about the aliens' protective equipment. "You folks meteorologists?" Pete asked. "That's some serious gear you've got there." "They're visitors from off-world," Danny explained. "First time experiencing Earth weather." "Well, you picked a good day for it," Pete said with a grin. "This is about as nice as spring storms get. Wait until you see what we get in tornado season. There was an entire period of the year dedicated to atmospheric destruction. Events and humans looked forward to it." Pete's daughter, Amy, who appeared to be about 7 years old, approached their table carrying a small furry creature. "Want to see my hamster?" Amy asked proudly. Zephyrka's biological scanners immediately identified the creature as a disease vector carrying multiple pathogens that would be fatal to most galactic species. The child was handling this biological hazard with her bare hands, apparently unaware that she was carrying a mobile contamination unit. "His name is Thunder," Amy announced, "because he's not scared of storms, just like me." Not scared of storms. This human child had been conditioned to find electromagnetic warfare entertaining rather than terrifying. The storm continued to intensify outside. Lightning strikes were hitting nearby structures, creating electrical surges that would disable most technology. Yet the diner's equipment continued operating normally. Human engineering had apparently developed ways to function during electromagnetic bombardment. "How do your systems survive the electrical interference?" Zephyrka asked Pete. "Oh, we get lightning strikes pretty regular," Pete replied. "Everything's grounded and surge protected. You learn to live with it when you're in Tornado Alley." Tornado Alley. Humans had given a casual nickname to a geographic region known for generating atmospheric destruction systems. "And they chose to live there permanently," the conversation was interrupted by a loud warning signal from outside. Zephyrka's translator identified it as an emergency alert system. "Tornado warning," Danny said, checking his instruments. "Rotation has been spotted about 10 miles southeast. Moving this direction. Tornado warning." An actual atmospheric destruction system was approaching, and the humans seemed more excited than alarmed. "Should we evacuate?" Whisper 9 asked urgently. "Nah. It's probably just a little one," Pete said, continuing to serve food to his customers. "We'll keep an eye on it. If it gets serious, we'll head to the basement." "And just a little one." Pete spoke of atmospheric destruction systems in terms of relative size. As if some levels of devastation were acceptable, through the diner windows they could see the approaching tornado. It was a vertical column of atmospheric chaos, spinning at incredible velocity and consuming everything in its path. The destruction system was clearly visible against the dark sky, moving across the landscape like a living weapon. Beautiful formation, Danny said, recording the phenomenon. Classic supercell structure. Look at that definition in the funnel. Beautiful. The human found active destruction systems aesthetically pleasing, but what amazed Zephyr Ka most was the response of the other humans in the diner. They watched the approaching tornado with interest, but not panic. Parents continued feeding their children. Adults discussed whether they needed to move to the basement with the same casual tone they might use to discuss changing tables. "Looks like it's going to miss us," Pete announced after watching for several minutes, turning southeast toward the empty farmland. The tornado passed within 2 miles of the settlement, close enough that they could hear its roar over the thunder. It left a visible path of destruction across the landscape before dissipating back into the storm clouds. "Good show," commented an elderly man at the counter. "Didn't see any that close last year." Good show. The humans had just witnessed a natural phenomenon capable of destroying entire settlements, and they rated it as entertainment. As the storm finally began to move away, normal human activities resumed immediately. Children returned to playing. Adults went back to their daily routines. The electromagnetic assault that had terrified the aliens was apparently just another weather event for Earth's residents. "So what did you think of your first thunderstorm?" Danny asked as they prepared to leave. Zephyr Ka looked back at the diner, where human families were finishing their meals as if they hadn't just survived a natural disaster. Children were drawing pictures of the lightning they had seen. The hospital visit was supposed to be the final part of their research. Dr. Susan Taylor, the chief surgeon at Denver General Medical Center, had offered to show them what she called routine medical procedures. Zephyr Ka had agreed, thinking, it would be less shocking than atmospheric warfare or ocean predators. That assumption lasted exactly 5 minutes. "This is our emergency room," Dr. Taylor explained, leading them through corridors filled with humans in various states of damage. Pretty quiet day, actually. Quiet day. Zephyr Ka watched humans bleeding, limping, and displaying obvious signs of physical trauma being treated as if this were normal. One human had apparently fallen from a significant height while rock climbing. Another had been skiing and collided with a tree. A third had been surfing and been attacked by what Dr. Taylor casually called a small shark. Small shark. Any predator attack would be considered a major medical emergency by galactic standards. Here, it was routine enough to warrant only casual mention. "Does this happen often?" Whisper 9 asked, observing the steady stream of injured humans. "Oh, sure," Dr. Taylor replied. "People stay pretty active around here. Hiking, biking, skiing, rock climbing, whitewater rafting. Colorado's got great outdoor recreation opportunities." Recreation opportunities? Humans voluntarily engaged in activities that resulted in regular physical damage, and they called it recreation. But the real shock came when Dr. Taylor invited them to observe actual surgery. "We're doing a knee replacement this morning," she announced. "Pretty standard procedure. The patient is a rock climber who wore out his joint over the years." Wore out his joint. The human had damaged his body through voluntary recreational activities and was now having damaged parts replaced with artificial components. The surgical procedure itself defied every principle of biological preservation that Zephyr Ka understood. Dr. Taylor used cutting tools to open the human's body, removed natural components, and installed mechanical replacements. The patient was unconscious during this process, apparently trusting the surgeon to perform major reconstruction on his biological systems. "How often do you perform these procedures?" Zephyr Ka asked, watching the casual efficiency with which Dr. Taylor modified the human's anatomy. "Knee replacements?" "Maybe 3 or 4 a week," Dr. Taylor replied, continuing her work. "Hip replacements?" "Shoulder repairs, spinal fusions. People wear out parts and we fix them up so they can get back to their activities." Get back to their activities. The humans were being repaired so they could return to the dangerous recreational pursuits that had damaged them in the first place, but even that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. "We also do a lot of preventive medicine," Dr. Taylor explained. Vaccinations, blood donations, organ donations. Community health is really important. Blood donations. Humans voluntarily gave away their life essence to help other humans survive. They had created a system where individuals sacrificed their own biological resources for the benefit of strangers. Organ donations. Some humans actually gave away vital body parts to save the lives of other humans. They deliberately damaged their own biological systems to improve someone else's functionality. "This is incredible," Whisper 9 transmitted privately to Zephyr. "They're performing voluntary biological modification on each other." The tour continued to the intensive care unit where humans in critical condition were being kept alive through technological intervention. Dr. Taylor explained each case with professional detachment that somehow managed to be both compassionate and terrifying. "This patient was in a climbing accident," she said, indicating a human connected to multiple life support devices. "Fell about 60 feet. Broke both legs, punctured a lung, internal bleeding, but he's recovering well. Should be back on the rock face in 6 months. Back on the rock face." The human who had nearly died from voluntary height-related trauma planned to return to the same activity once his biological systems were repaired. "And this one was attacked by a bear while camping," Dr. Taylor continued. "Pretty unusual bears. Normally avoid people. He must have surprised it somehow." Camping. Humans voluntarily spend time in wilderness areas populated by apex predators, apparently for enjoyment. When they were attacked by said predators, it was considered unusual rather than inevitable. As they completed the hospital tour, Zephyr's understanding of human civilization reached a breaking point. These beings had not only adapted to survive on a Class 13 Deathworld, they had developed a culture based on actively seeking out the most dangerous aspects of their environment for entertainment. They climbed mountains that would crush most species. They swam in oceans filled with predators. They exposed themselves to atmospheric destruction systems for fun. They voluntarily damaged their bodies through recreational activities, then had themselves surgically repaired so they could do it again. Most remarkably, they seemed to genuinely love their dangerous world and everything on it. The return journey to the orbital station was quiet. Both aliens spent the time reviewing their data and trying to process what they had witnessed. Every measurement confirmed that Earth was indeed a Class 13 Deathworld, possibly worse than originally classified, but humans didn't just survive there, they thrived. They had turned a planetary nightmare into a home, and they defended that home with obvious pride and affection. Back aboard Harmony's Edge, Zephyr began composing the most difficult report of the being's career. How could anyone explain what they had discovered? How could the Galactic Classification Committee understand that an entire species had evolved to find deadly conditions not just tolerable, but actually enjoyable? The report began with factual observations. Earth's gravity was indeed crushing. By galactic standards, the atmospheric pressure was dangerous. The weather systems were violent. The fauna was hostile. The flora produced toxins. The radiation levels were lethal, but then came the impossible part. Humans had evolved to thrive in these conditions. They considered crushing gravity normal. They found violent weather systems beautiful. They treated hostile fauna as friends. They used toxic flora as medicine. They turned lethal radiation into recreational tanning. They had somehow convinced their death world to accept them as part of the ecosystem. Predators that should have destroyed them instead played with them. Weather systems that should have killed them instead provided entertainment. Environmental hazards that should have been obstacles instead became recreational opportunities. Classification recommendation? Whisper 9 asked. Reviewing the preliminary report, Zephyr's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty patterns. Earth should definitely be reclassified as Class 14, possibly Class 15. The danger levels are actually higher than we originally thought. But what about the humans' request to classify it as Class 8? That's the problem, Zephyr replied. From the humans' perspective, their request is completely reasonable. Earth is safe for humans. It's only a death world if you're not a human. The final recommendation was unprecedented in galactic classification history. Earth would be reclassified as a Class 14 Deathworld, but with a new designation, inhabited by adaptive apex species. The report concluded with a warning that was part scientific observation and part philosophical revelation. Humans were perhaps the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, not because they were aggressive or hostile, but because they had evolved to consider the impossible as normal. They had turned a death world into a home. They had made friends with predators. They had turned natural disasters into entertainment. They had developed a civilization based on the principle that anything could be overcome, adapted to, or simply enjoyed. The response from the Galactic Classification Committee came quickly. The new classification was approved, along with a recommendation that Earth be designated as off-limits to most galactic species, not because it was dangerous, but because humans were so adapted to danger that they didn't recognize it anymore. Ambassador Jake Morrison's response to the new classification was characteristically cheerful. He thanked the committee for their thoroughness and mentioned that Earth's tourism board was working on promotional materials for other species who might want to visit. He attached a preliminary brochure advertising adventure vacations to places like Mount Everest, the Amazon rainforest, and the Great Barrier Reef. The brochure described these locations as exciting challenges and bucket list destinations for thrill seekers. Mount Everest was a peak so high that most species would die from atmospheric pressure alone. The Amazon was a biological hazard zone filled with venomous creatures and toxic plants. The Great Barrier Reef was in an ocean that had already terrified the research team. Humans wanted to share these experiences with other species as vacation destinations. Additional notes for future researchers, Zephyr-Ka added to the final report. Humans appear to genuinely believe that other species would enjoy the same recreational activities that they do. This suggests either remarkable optimism about galactic species compatibility or a complete inability to recognize that their adaptations are unique. The report ended with a personal observation that Zephyr-Ka almost didn't include. During their entire visit to Earth, they had never seen a human complain about their planet's conditions.